Hi, I'm Kyrill. So I should be teaching 12-year-olds right now. I was lucky to get the day off. What I did was I tracked my personal reading speed and number of words read by collaborating with software, a concept called Spritz, which projects whole texts, one word at a time, at a rhythm that feels comfortable. It aligns words in a way that's quite comfortable to the eye, and I was very interested in its implications, because here's the headline: you can read Harry Potter in 3 hours, because it allows you to read much faster than you ordinarily would be able to read. The implications were wider than that, however, which I was very aware of as an English teacher. It means that I could read this traditional Japanese poem in 25 milliseconds, which has the obvious sub-questions of, well, is this useful, or is this actually something quite alien from the activity of reading? And this debate is very polarized. A lot of people have emotional opinions on both sides, and I wanted to step away from the emotional opinions and to try to resolve the issue. Was Spritz a good thing or not a good thing? Now, I'm a humanities graduate, so of course the first thing that I knew I had to do was consult Jacques Derrida, whose texts between 5 and 500 words per minute remain uniformly incomprehensible. What I actually did was I did a randomized control study. I tracked Spritz, reading a text on Spritz versus sitting with a book and reading it versus reading the same text on the same screen, but just scrolling through rather than using Spritz. I actually did this with my students, but I'll be focusing on my own personal discoveries with just a few mentions of these guys. My school, like loads of schools in England and in other countries, has a database of standardized comprehension quizzes attached to texts, long and short, and all of my students were already doing these. So I was lucky. I could use this as a data pool that existed for one particular book. How much are they understanding? And they started reading. The first thing we noticed that using Spritz, they found classics like Charles Dickens, like Robert Louis Stevenson, easier to read on Spritz than some of the popular fiction. It seemed like there was something about the quality of the prose that made it easier to read. And this is what I found in my personal spritzing. I read lots of contemporary novels, lots of classics, and it was working. It seemed that I was able to take it in and I was able to comprehend it, and my reading speed, as soon as I started using Spritz, went from 230 to 350 words per minute. And after about a month, I could read at 600, and I settled into 450 words per minute, which for me, I'm very busy, it was a good thing. But the other thing I started noticing is, whilst I'm reading on Spritz, I entered this kind of state, this mental state that wasn't unlike mindfulness. I settled into what is commonly called a flow state in popular psychology, and around this time I got one of these, an EEG band, for measuring my level of calm, for seeing how my meditation is usually going. So I conducted a few self-experiments. I put the band on, I put Spritz on, and I gradually increased the reading speed on Spritz. So once every minute, I put the speed up, and I wanted to see, okay, what does this look like on the simple EEG that Muse produces? So here's one story whilst I'm increasing the speed, and the EEG looks like this. At first, the faster it goes, the more activation there is, and then it seems to settle into a lower speed. Now, maybe this is confirmation bias, and actually the peaks are where all the exciting bits are, and right at the start there's some kind of ninja, and then there's a bit about tax returns, or maybe I just stopped paying attention. But I don't think so, because there's a couple of different ways I approach the data. Now, if I look at my comprehension scores for this same story, they seem to match up. Where I get an incorrect answer, they seem to match up with peaks. So they seem to be bits where the quality of my attention isn't as good. The ones that are right, it seems like I am reading. I'm not just thinking about nice flowers. This is whilst I'm reading that I'm in this state of excitation. With traditional reading, it seems to be a lot more variable. This was the case across my data sample. There's a lot more variability on sitting and reading a book or reading it on the screen, whereas Spritz tends to sustain a similar kind of profile across time. There are fewer lower, calmer parts, and there are fewer higher, more active parts. And subjectively, this was confirmed as well. When I read on Spritz, or when my students read on Spritz, they can read for longer without getting distracted. However, you miss some of the nuances. The reading, in some ways, isn't as deep, and yet the information, the actual comprehension of the important ideas, of the important details, is just as good. It's also useful because it feels less effortful, which for a lot of my dyslexic students was hugely profound, because suddenly they weren't struggling to read, they were able to keep up, they were able to absorb this stuff, and they were able to track how much progress they've been making, which for us is really important as well. It means that I could read for pleasure, which is great on Spritz for some books. Thomas Pynchon, Marcel Proust are great on Spritz, but also it meant that what I could do was, whilst working full time, I could read a whole load of informational studies. I can pull the data out in a far more efficient time space. I could say, here's a 20-minute slot. Here's the speed that I would need if I wanted to read this paper in 20 minutes. I pasted it into readsy.co, which is a website that all of you can access, and it worked. I read lots and lots of papers. My kids read lots and lots of books, and it seems to be something which is very exciting. Have a go. This is 250. Right, 350. It's free. It's available in lots of places. Get the Chrome extension. Go to readsy.co. I've got my own testing platform that I developed with Spritz, and I hope that we can use this and we can do some collaboration, because how exciting to get exact number of words and reading speed. So I could say, I'm going to pledge 1,000 words per day whilst I'm doing some research, or I'm going to find myself, or I'm going to see, does listening to a certain kind of music affect how quickly I read or how many words I read. I think there's a lot of potential here, which I as a teacher am very excited about. Thank you.